Thank you, John, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I actually think it's kind of coincidental, this panelist here, because my father was born in Ireland. I lived for 6 years in Italy. I did my graduate degree in London and also served there as a diplomat. So I think I'm the epitome of what a Europeanist American is. And I think that's part of the story I want to tell today, because there are a lot of people think about our relationship, but that we're separate, but we're not. There are 70% of Americans trace their ancestry to Europe. And about 14 million Americans come to Europe every year for tourism, and about 8 million Europeans come to the United States for tourism. And that's not to mention the millions who work and study in each other's places. So our relationship is very deep, it's enduring, and it's multifaceted. But it's also primarily based on our democratic values, our belief in democracy, the rule of law, individual rights. And I think that's important to understand the context of what I'm about to say, because I think we often think about our relationship as a snapshot in time, but it's actually a 500-year-old relationship. Now, the new administration has also reiterated the importance of our relationship with Europe. President Trump and Vice President Pence have met with more than a dozen European leaders in their first 9 months, and they've traveled to Europe twice. And we have always believed very strongly that a strong Europe is in our national interest. And President Trump even has said that. He said, a strong Europe is a blessing to the West and to the world. Now, I know a lot of people have heard about our America First policy and what that means. And what it does mean is that President Trump and this administration put our prosperity and security first. But it does not mean that America First means America alone. And President Trump has even said that our relationship with Europe has been, is now, and always will be essential. For we are stronger together than we will ever be apart. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're working together, and then particularly I'm going to talk about our relationship with 3 countries, Iran, Russia, and Turkey, because I know that is probably on many people's minds here. But first and foremost, we're working together to combat violent extremism. Since 2014, there have been over 150 terrorist attacks plotted or carried out in Europe. And we believe it's fundamental that we work together to combat the scourge of terrorism, as we saw even just yesterday or 2 days ago in New York. We need to work together to defeat ISIS. We need to share information about the threats facing both our regions. We also need to figure out what the causes of the violent extremism is and work together. But US and Europe is also working closely together to stop nuclear proliferation, to strengthen democracies, to promote rule of law, to combat the scourge of terrorism, to provide aid to countries in distress, especially those hit by disasters. So these things stay constant whatever administration is in place. And we feel very, very strongly that a strong Europe is necessary for all of our national interests. And I must say, hearing what my 3 speakers said about us, we are also concerned that Europe is not going to be as strong as it has been in its past. And it is something that is a challenge for all of us. Now, if you bear with me, I know a lot of people are very interested in the US approach to Iran. And I think, to be clear, I want to read what is happening on our approach to Iran so that there is no misunderstanding. President Trump has decided to decline to provide a certification to the US Congress under the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act. The president's decision was based upon the requirements of this act, which is US domestic legislation, distinct from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action known as the JCPOA. The president concluded that he cannot certify under this US legislation that the sanctions relief that was provided to Iran is proportionate to the steps they took under the nuclear deal. The president has directed the administration to work with our allies and with Congress to fix the flaws in the JCPOA's sunset clause, to bolster enforcement of the deal, and to correct its omission of constraints on ballistic missiles. Secretary Tillerson has said it remains our intent to stay in the JCPOA if we can address the serious flaws of the agreement. He also said the Trump administration isn't seeking to disrupt European business deals with Iran. But Secretary Tillerson has also stressed we need to acknowledge and counter Iran's destabilizing influence. Iran is developing a ballistic missile capability. Iran supports terrorist groups with weapons and other material assistance. Iran is a global challenge facing all of us. Now, I also want to talk about Russia. Our new ambassador to Russia said in his hearing before the Senate a couple of weeks ago that our relationship with Russia is among the most consequential and complex foreign policy challenges we face. But because the United States and Russia are both nuclear superpowers and permanent members of the UN Security Council, we have to deal with each other for the sake of global stability and security. As Ambassador Huntsman said, but our view remains that Russia continues to violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its neighbors, and that the Russian government interfered in the US election last year, and that Moscow continues to meddle in democratic processes of our friends. We also believe that Russia is disregarding its arms control obligations and commitments. We cannot simply ignore all of this. But we do share some common goals with Russia, and then defeating ISIS is first and foremost, and finding a political solution to the situation in Syria is also another. But we have also said very clearly that our position on sanctions requires Russia to reverse its actions, particularly in the Crimea. We do provide a constructive relationship with Russia based on mutual cooperation and common interest. And 10 years ago, I served in Russia as a diplomat, and I know we worked together on many, many joint economic programs. We seek to balance these goals with a clear-eyed vision of Russia, and we do hope we can move beyond this very low point of trust between our two countries. Now, turning to Turkey. Obviously, the European Union and the United States has a very challenging relationship with Turkey these days, especially after the failed coup attempt of last year, which we condemned. But both President Trump and President Erdogan met in September and reaffirmed their strategic relationship and have discussed how to defeat and confront terrorism, some of the causes of regional instability. We firmly believe that Turkey needs to stay anchored in the transatlantic community. Now, turning to Cyprus issue. I must say, many Cypriots, many of us in the international community, and including myself, were very disappointed in the outcome of the talks this summer. And this is a time for reflection, as the UN Secretary General has said. But we believe that so much progress was made during the 2.5 years that progress should not be lost. We also believe that the only finger pointing that should take place is the finger that's pointing to the future, to the best path forward, which is a bizonal, bi-communal federation. And we do stand ready to support the talks should they resume again. Now, lastly, I just want to touch briefly about energy, because we're facing a new world in energy, and I know we'll talk about that during a different panel. And probably first and foremost is the role the US is playing now. In February 2016, we exported our first LNG shipment. And since then, we've made 175 shipments to more than 20 countries, including some in Europe. We believe that increased supplies of LNG, whether it's from the United States, Australia, or other countries, increases global stability. It increases global energy security, and it makes any one region less dependent on limited sources of gas. We are hopeful that there'll be some sizable discoveries of gas here in the Eastern Mediterranean, and we believe those discoveries can help promote political stability and can be incentive for greater partnerships, and we really are very supportive of the Cyprus, Israeli, Greece, and the Cyprus-Israeli-Egypt relationships that are growing, and we encourage those and believe they really are an anchor for political stability. But there's also some risks with the natural gas, and I think we have to be cognizant that it can be an incentive for political stability as well as an incentive for political instability, and we need to maximize the political stability. Now, lastly, I want to just kind of give you my views as a person who's been a diplomat for 28 years and has worked in US and European relations for most of that time. There's always been a chorus of people who believe that the US-European relationship is at its end, that we can't survive the next crisis in our relationship. And I think, like many things, and especially as Europe itself has realized, whenever there's a crisis, we always emerge stronger. We also have to be very cognizant that internally in our own countries, there are forces trying to pull us apart. And I think we pull us apart internally and pull us apart among our friends. So we need to concentrate on how to strengthen our own democracies, but also to recognize all that we've achieved together and that all that we will achieve together. It is very important that the US-European transatlantic relationship remains a pillar of global stability and that it remains a force for both progress and for forces for good for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.